I think it's truly time to correct my wrongdoings. Hey guys, Otak here, back with another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video of the Malice variety. So about a month ago, I kind of jumped the gun, I will not lie, and I decided to make a full guide to Malice, and quite frankly, I did not know the deck well enough to be doing that, so apologies on my end. However, now I think it's time we circle back and we do a proper guide to Malice. Not only have I been playing the deck extensively, but I have played multiple different variations of the deck, so at this point, I for the most part know what I'm talking about. So today we're going to be talking about several different things. We're going to be going over the techs that are being run with Malice, the different engines, the different builds. We're going to be talking about the counters, the pros and the cons, but then we're going to be going over the combo for the mainline deck. I'm not going to be going over the combos for like if you're running Fiendsmith or if you're running Kashtira, because quite frankly that heavily relies on you as a player. We'll also be going over some very specific interactions that you as a player for Malice will need to know, but then also if you're playing against Malice, maybe don't fall for these tricks. Before we jump on into the proper in-depth guide to Malice, I have noticed that a great deal of you that watch my videos are not currently subscribed to the channel, meaning that I would greatly appreciate it if not only you hit that subscribe button, but you also hit the bell button for future notifications of when I upload videos like this one, but also like the video, but also comment down below what build of Malice you're running in the current format. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you a proper in-depth guide to Malice. Alright, so let's talk about the pros and cons of the deck, and they're pretty obvious. But the pros, this deck can play through a metric fuck ton of hand traps, which is probably one of the reasons you're watching this video to hopefully figure out how to counter this deck. And of course, we'll get into the counters in a little bit, but the pros here is that the deck can play through a great deal of hand traps if it's ran by a good pilot. Obviously, a bad pilot's going to probably lose to a summon Dormouse, get impermed pass scenario, but a good pilot knows how to play around hand traps, mainly Imperm, Nibiru, and all the others, because Ash and Droll really just doesn't do anything against this deck. Another pro is it's a shifter deck. Shifter alone can shut off stuff like Ghost Ogre and Droll and Lockbird, but it can just shut off like rogue decks that you are not really wanting to deal with. It can shut off Fiendsmith package from like other decks. Obviously, you're not going to want a shifter on, the mirror match, but overall, it's, a shifter deck's a shifter deck. This card's fucking stupid. And then for like the last pro of the deck, and this is like a pretty big one, is there's like a lot of room for non-engine and a lot of tech cards, because at most you're playing 15 main deck cards and then 3 extra deck, and then everything else is just up to what you want to do with the deck. The major cons of the deck, and I did touch on this just a moment ago, this has a high skill ceiling. This deck is not an easy deck to pilot, at least not easy to pilot very well. Any Joe Schmo can normal summon Dormouse, Dormouse effect, banish Rabbit, and then so forth, but a good pilot will know maybe not to just throw all their eggs in one basket right on the first play. If they have other options, they might want to take that avenue to bait out other interaction. But also on top of that, the deck has many different ways to adapt if they do get hit with interaction like Imperm or Nibiru, so the pilot really needs to be skilled enough to know how to play around those hand traps, but if they get hit with them, how to adapt around them. Another con of the deck is that there are 2 forms of locks with this deck. One is a soft lock coming from the Malice main deck monsters. When they revive themselves from the banish pile, they lock you into Link monsters, meaning that if you are playing a subsidiary engine that does not play Link monsters, you're going to want to kind of start with those cards rather than just turbo out into the Malice cards. But then on top of that, we play Splash Mage. For those who don't know, Splash Mage, when it uses its effect to revive a Cyberse from the graveyard, hard locks you into Cyberse monsters for the rest of the turn, not just from the extra deck, but from the main deck. Meaning that if you are playing, again, another subsidiary engine that is not Cyberse, you're going to want to start with those cards or you're going to be cut off from them after you use Splash Mage. However, a lot of the side engines that Malice has started playing has almost made Splash Mage irrelevant, but we still play it just in case it has to come up. And then for the final con, and this is the biggest one, Artifact Lancia. Malice as a deck heavily relies on banishing, similar to Ritual Beast, and if you get hit with Artifact Lancia, there's a good chance you're just not playing the game anymore. Now, there have been engines for the deck that have been discovered that help you play under Lancia, and we'll get into that when we get to the builds. However, for the most part, if Lancia gets hit with you, you are, for the most part, just not playing your Malice cards. It's going to be very difficult, but you can still maybe attempt something. And that's really it for the pros and cons. There are more. I just wanted to touch on the major ones. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the tech cards, but also some of the counters you could be using when going against or playing Malice. All right, so we're going to start with the tech cards. The obvious ones are Bestials. We want our Malice monsters to get banished, and what better way to do that than Bestials being able to banish Lights and Darks. The Bestials also are just really good in the current format simply because Fiendsmith is running around, but Bestials being able to banish a Malice monster, even like in the mirror match, you can use it to interrupt certain scenarios. Yes, they'll still get their body, but you can kind of counterplay with them with the Bestials. So the Bestials are also like, not only are they extenders, but they are also hand traps essentially in this current format. You could just be playing like regular Magdamut, Druisworm, and Baldrake, but if you want to take it a step further, you can play Lubellion in Regained. Regained is actually really good against Malice because if they banish a Malice monster, you just go chain 2 Regained, put that shit back, and you draw a card. So I know a lot of decks currently are also playing like the Lubellion package because it does kind of hose the match against Malice. But if you don't want to play the 4 extra cards that are 3 Lubellion, 1 Regained, you can still just play the like 3 or 4 Bestials that you want to run. We are seeing Fiendsmith being played in Malice for the most part, but that's just really Fiendsmith being played in anything it can be splashed into. A lot of people would say this conflicts because Fiendsmith does have Xyz monsters like Caesar, they have fusion monsters like Desiree and Necroquip, and they even have like synchro monsters like Chaos Angel. But if you do end up locking yourself into Link monsters before you can actually go into the full Fiendsmith package, then you can really just use the Fiendsmith monsters as extra bodies. As we know, they alone can get you an Appaloosa on the board if Appaloosa was still legal. But also, you can just use them to like dump Paradise, so that way you have Paradise on your opponent's turn to send Desiree. Desiree sends something on their board to the graveyard. So it allows further interaction, but also allows extra bodies. You don't have to just use it to make Caesar or Desiree. But on top of that, the Fiendsmith package does let you set up Caesar, which means you are not scared of Nibiru if your opponent has it. It does force interaction. The Fiendsmith package alone forces a lot of interaction because the last thing you want is to see a Desiree or a Caesar on the board and you have no way to deal with it. So overall, the Fiendsmith package is also just a good tech. The most popular tech, and we'll get into this when we get into the deck builds, is Sky Striker. We are mainly seeing Engage, Widow Anchor, and Hornet Drones, but we might see Shark Cannon get thrown in with the release of Eclipse Twins for Ryzeal. It really depends. But overall, Engage, this just allows you to further extend. It allows you to kind of get to your Link 3 Malice monsters without any major commitment. You just go Hornet Drone, summon Kagari, add Hornet Drones summon another token, normal summon like Rabbit, and then you just make Ransom without getting in a major threat of like Nibiru or anything along those lines. But also, the Engage package also allows you to play a lot of draw spells on top of the fact that Engage also draws cards. Just overall, another cool tech. We're seeing the possibility of cash cards getting played. I know the cash build is less favorable these days because Lancia still hurts these cards, but overall Unicorn is just a threat to be reckoned with in this current format because it's just ripping cards at the extra deck. We're seeing a lot of Fiendsmith builds running 2 Requiem just so they don't lose the only Requiem they have. Fenrir is just really good going second. Fenrir alone can just body certain boards, not Ryzeal obviously, but it can body very specific game states. If you end up getting Kashtira, Unicorn, and Fenrir on the board, you can end up making Draco Sack and then can go into Cherubini off the 2 tokens, go into Haggard, and then you have full Malice combo from there, plus Birth can revive back that Unicorn. Once again, just extra bodies for the deck, but also possible 1-card starter, essentially. Further tech cards is stuff like Allure Darkness, Signet Mining, and Gold Sarcophagus. Gold Sarc is essentially just a like 1-card starter, not completely, because if you go Gold Sarc, banish Dormouse, you have already expended Dormouse, so you can't just go into Haggard right out the gate. But Gold Sarc also can just be free extension. You can use it to banish like Dotscaper or something along those lines, which we are, as having as a tech card. Signet Mining can be used to search out like Code of Soul or Meowmine, or just search out extenders or starters. Overall, we're seeing this card either fluctuate between 0 or 3. There's a lot of decks that don't run it. There's a lot of decks that are running it at 3. We're seeing it jump all over the place depending on the deck list. Allure Darkness, you mainly only see Allure in the Sky Striker version of the build because we just need extra spell count. But Allure Darkness, again, you just draw 2 and you banish a Dark, aka your Malice monsters. Not only is it card advantage, but it is also just getting a body on the board without committing a normal summon. Just overall, really strong card. The problem here is that Allure and Sarc do pretty much just lose to Lancia. But overall, the deck, for the most part, loses to Lancia. Another card that's getting teched, mainly in the pure version, but even then, I just don't recommend this card. But I am seeing it every so often. Parallel Exceed, obviously, if you link summon a monster, you special summon this from the hand, and then you special summon another one from the deck. It's an okay card. It's just free bodies, but overall, I just personally wouldn't recommend this card, but that's perfectly up to you if you want to run this card. Dotscaper, this is the card we're usually banishing off Ransom. This card, yes, both effects are once per duel, and you can only use one a turn, but you wouldn't be surprised at how often this card comes up. You're usually banishing this when Ransom gets banished to revive herself, and then this revives itself when it gets banished. However, there are scenarios where you can just go Terahertz, send this to the graveyard off Terahertz effect, revive it. And then also, if you open it, if you have Signet Mining as well, it is just a free body. You can just normal summon Dotscaper, link it away, bring back a body, and if you have further extension from there, you know, more power to you. We are seeing one of two cards getting in the main deck. It really is up to the player which one they play. Code of Soul or Meow Mine. These are usually the other secondary target off of Terahertz to send to the graveyard. They can be searched off the Signet Mining to special summon from hand if you have a Link monster. Code of Soul is basically just an IP on your opponent's turn. However, I don't personally like this one because if you already have Cryptor or Terahertz in rotation, this doesn't do a lot. Whereas a card like Meow Mine, you can make sure you end on like SP or IP, and then Meow Mine is just a free bounce, essentially. This card does force interaction with your opponent. I have, in many games, had this in the graveyard, and my opponent has to just rapid fire the Bestial, or this card will become problematic. But it is really up to you which one you want to run. Like I said, I personally just did not find any value out of Code of Soul in my personal games, but if this is something you want to run, more power to you. I personally prefer Meow Mine. And then, of course, the obvious one, we talked on this. This is a deck that can run Shifter. Obviously, the best two decks in the format, Ryzeal and Malice, they both play under Shifter, so this probably isn't a main deck card, despite the fact I'm seeing people run it in the main deck. Shifter does lock out, for the most part, the Fiendsmith package, which is good because Fiendsmith is literally everywhere. But overall, I just wouldn't run this in the main deck. It is perfectly up to you if you want to. These last two cards I wanted to talk about because Supreme Darkness does come out at the end of the month, aka like a week from now from recording this video, and that is Template Skipper and Mini Malian. These cards are possible tech cards. I don't want to just set that in concrete by any means, but these cards have the ability to be teched in. For those who are curious what these cards do, Template Skipper, you can special summon this card from your hand to a zone a Cyberse Link monster points to. It's another extender just like Meow Mine and Code of Soul. Basically, not only what this card is going to do is it's going to banish a Cyberse monster, aka our Malice monsters, and then it's going to be treated as the monster that got banished. And then on top of that, new chain, that Malice monster comes back. Meaning that Template Skipper can turn itself into a Malice monster so we can use it to link summon a Malice monster. The second card is Mini Malian. This is a TCG exclusive that is getting released in Supreme Darkness. You can banish one other card from your hand, special summon this card from your hand. Wombo Combo can banish a Malice monster, special summon it, Malice monster comes back. You can banish one level 4 or lower monster you control, special summon one monster from your deck with the original type and attribute that banished monster had on the field, but 1 or 2 levels lower than its original level. The reason I like this card a lot isn't just because it can banish one from hand, and this is the reason I like Meow Mine even more in the next format, is because Meow Mine is a level 2 dark. All Malice main deck monsters are level 3 darks, meaning you can banish away a Malice from the graveyard, special summon Meow Mine, and then the Malice monster comes back from the graveyard, meaning you have Meow Mine in rotation, you have a Malice monster in rotation, you have all of this free extension from essentially one little guy. The problem here is he's a water psychic. This is going to be really hard to search because it's also level 4, which means you can't just go E-Telly into this card, but you could just run this as a one of, and if you see it, you see it. This card's really good. I'm just curious to see how the TCG incorporates this, if they incorporate it at all. I think it has really good application, but we will just have to see. As for counters, like I said, a great deal of you are probably watching this video to talk about the counters. The big one is Lancia. I've already talked about this in the pros and cons. Lancia can just alone shut the deck out. Very specific hands from Malice can just cripple to this card. If we're running Bestials, obviously the Bestials can't play under Lancia. Allure of Darkness, Gold Sark, and the Field Spell can't do anything under Lancia. The Malice main deck monsters can't do anything under Lancia. And that is why we are seeing the massive play of the Sky Striker and Fiendsmith cards, which is, again, we'll get into that when we get to the deck builds. Chaos Hunter, I personally would not recommend running this one. Obviously, it does very similar to Lancia, and it gives you a body, but that last part's the catch-22 here. Malice plays Thrust in the sideboard 9 times out of 10. Thrust is just a very good card, especially in the current format. It helps you get to Talents, which Talents alone can body a whole board, especially against Ryzeal. The last thing you want to do is put a monster on your board and let them search a card, because if they can search a card, they're just going to go like talents, take the Chaos Hunter, link it away, and then they're able to banish again. I personally would not recommend Chaos Hunter. If you're going to do the no banishing rule, I would go Lancia or Imperial Iron Wall. Obviously, you have to go first for Iron Wall to be effective, but it is still effective. It does essentially the same thing. Just make sure you're not wanting to banish cards in the process. But Imperial Iron Wall is also a good possibility as a sideboard option. Further hand traps, of course, is Ghost Spell. If your opponent activates the Malice field spell and you Ghost Spell, not only does it not resolve, but it goes to the graveyard because Ghost Spell negates activation, which means any continuous spell or field spell that would get negated by Ghost Spell further goes to the graveyard. Not to mention, Ghost Spell is just really good against the Bestials. You can stop them from further extending. There's just some really cool stuff you can do with Ghost Spell. I would recommend it as a sideboard option as well. Imperm, really just target negation, Veiler, and Mourner are also like pretty fine here, but Imperm obviously is a trap, so it's not going to set off the tactics duos. But Imperm is specific, and I need to emphasize that a lot here, because obviously if they set a card like a good pilot's going to do and then they normal summon Dormouse, you're not going to want to Imperm the Dormouse, simply because yes, that set card could be a bluff, but there are better moments after that point to Imperm. Now if they just normal summon Dormouse right out the gate, I would still Imperm, and then if they have further extension from there, you did what you could. But Imperm, if they have a set card, don't do it. I do not recommend doing it at all, because if that is not a bluff, then you've just wasted a card. You can save Imperm for something like the Splash Mage or the Firewall Dragon that'll come up later in the combo. You can wait till their set cards are gone. Like, you could Imperm the White Binder and hope that they just don't draw into GWC, because if you cut them off of GWC, it is going to pretty much remove a lot of their interaction on your turn. Same reason Ghost Spell is also good, because if you just prevent them from getting that binder back on the board, it is going to save you a lot of stress on your turn. Nibiru is very, very weird in this deck. Nibiru, like at face value, Nibiru cooks this deck because they just summon a lot, and at the right moments, the choke point is just like in your face, Nibiru here. There's some moments where just Nibiru literally doesn't do anything. A very popular combo that you're going to see a Malice player doing is that they're going to have Ransom on board with TB11 set, and they just search the field spell, and then they're going to activate TB11, banish the Ransom, summon out one other name, Ransom come back, Ransom banish Dotscaper, summon Dotscaper, open game state. That is the most popular scenario you're going to run into, and that is probably your best scenario to hit your opponent with Nibiru, because at that point, they've already gone through Ransom's banish effect, they've probably gone through their 3 name banish effects, maybe one exception, and then from there, they have to figure out how to extend past a Nibiru token. Now, Malice decks are playing like Link Spider to get rid of the token and maybe extend further than that. It really is all contextual. Nibiru is good, but a lot of it depends on how much further extension your opponent has after they get hit with Nibiru, and obviously you don't always know that, but the best scenario to Nibiru is after they revive the Ransom off of her banish effect. Another cool tech card is going to be Soul Drain. I saw this ran a lot at a recent regional in the sideboard, some in the main board. This card's basically just skill drain against Malice, because it just makes it so banished monsters and monsters in the graveyard can't activate their effects. Lovely. 2 more hand traps. Phantasme is really good against this deck, especially if you don't have like the Mulch armies. Phantasme is really cool because you just kind of hold it until your opponent's established like most of their board, because a Malice pilot is usually going to get to a point in the end board where they have like White Binder, Firewall Dragon, and Ransom on the board. That's 3 monsters, that's 4 draws. That would be the perfect time. And then also Phantasme, you know, kind of shuts out the Firewall Dragon if they try to target cards on your field. But overall, Phantasme kind of lets you fix your hand. Same with Mulch Army Meowls, as it's called here in the TCG. It's called Nihilus over in the OCG. But this card is interesting. I definitely foresee us seeing this card in the sideboard, specifically against Malice. For those who don't know, this card basically says that if your opponent special summons from the graveyard at the banish, draw a card, and then the same end phase effect where if you have 6+ cards compared to what your opponent controls, put cards back. I see this card getting sided simply for Malice. The problem is it is a secret rare, so it is going to come with a hefty price tag. So overall, I think this is going to still be seeing a lot of play. If you have this card after Supreme Darkness, I would recommend putting it in the sideboard. Last card for counters, and I say counter very lightly here, is going to be Ultimate Slayer. I don't like this card against Malice. I like this card a lot better against Ryzeal, and even then, Ultimate Slayer, your opponent cannot activate monster effects in response to this card. Send a card to the extra deck, pop a card with the same card type, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, Pendulum Link. I don't like this card simply because Malice plays trap cards, and also their end board is layered, meaning that they're not going to die to a board breaker like Ultimate Slayer. And most likely what you end up sending, obviously, is a Link monster. It's not going to get you far enough. If they end on GWC, they are still going to survive past the Ultimate Slayer. And really all you've done is just like inconvenience them in a minute way. I don't like Ultimate Slayer against Malice because the end board is so incredibly layered. Not to mention, again, they do play trap cards that they can activate in response to this, and then their monsters can respond to the trap cards, similar to Dark Ruler No More scenarios with the Desiree plus the Azarun statue from Snake Eye format. Again, I just don't like Ultimate Slayer. If you choose to run it at your own risk, or be very aware of what further interactions your opponent's going to have after you hit them with this. As for the extra deck, there's not a lot of like tech that's being run. Obviously, you can play like Link Spider or IP Masquerena. You can play like a couple of cards that aren't being played in every build. But the only one I really want to talk about is the Terahertz techs. I'm seeing a lot of fluctuation between these three monsters. Desavorm is pretty much seeing play in every build. It does not matter. Spell Trap Negate is just way too strong. Between the other two is Packbit and the Aggregator. This one really is just, what are you trying to do? What do you want to do? If you are playing Ultimate Slayer, definitely play Aggregator in some scenario because Ryzeal. But Packbit also is just really good because it is essentially like Flameburge from Snake Eye format. You're just putting a monster on your opponent's field to the Spell and Trap Zone. Most likely they don't have a way to get it out of there, so it's just stuck there for the rest of the duel. It really is just dependent on what you're going for. I think it's personal preference for Packbit or Aggregator. I don't like Aggregator at all, personally. I would prefer Packbit because, again, it just makes it really hard to access that card because most decks don't have a way to get a monster out of their Spell and Trap Zone back onto the field or into the graveyard in this current format. So I think Packbit is just really good at that point because you can just put like the detonator in the back row, and yeah, they have a second one, but if you get rid of that second one, it's gonna be hard to get it back into play. But overall, that's really like the tech cards and the cards I would recommend countering. Also, I wanted to talk about obviously some cards that have the potential, but also cards maybe I wouldn't recommend running. Let's just real quick jump on into the builds. I've already touched on them a little bit, but let's just talk about them in further depth. We're going to start with the version of Malice that has kind of fallen off a little bit compared to the other builds, and that is Kashtira, which is the version of the deck that I'm currently playing, simply because it's a little more budget than the other two. Now, the other two decks I do have recent topping lists for. I just couldn't find any for Kashtira, and again, it's because the deck kind of has fallen off a little bit, but we're just going to talk about my current build, and we're just going to talk really like in a broad sense what the deck is trying to accomplish. All right, so to start, obviously you don't see Molcharmy Fualas in here. I don't own Fualas. Again, this is my own personal build. If you have Fualas, I would recommend maybe cutting some non-engine for Fualas to be put in here. But overall, we are just running, you know, the typical hand traps. We're running Ash, Ogre, a Droll, Imperm, and then we are running like Lancia, Shifter, and Bell in the side deck. We're running 2 talents. I recommend running 3 if you have 3. I only own 2 because, again, this card just bodies the current like Ryzeal matchup. And then overall, we're running a very small Kashtira package. We're running Unicorn plus Fenrir plus Birth plus Wraithoth. I like Terraforming in this build simply because Terraforming has a little more application than maybe some other versions of Malice where they're only searching the Malice field spell, whereas we can search Wraithoth. Wraithoth starts the Kashtira part of the deck. Unicorn plus Birth is pretty much just like a force of its own when you're going against it, because Unicorn's going to rip a card every time you activate a monster effect. Well, not every time, but once a turn. It punishes your opponent for interacting against you on your turn if they say like Droll, and then you just Unicorn rip a card out of their extra deck, and then maybe you have talents, so you rip a card out their hand. But then on top of that, Birth is going to banish cards from their graveyard if they activate a spell. And then obviously you use the combination of Unicorn and Birth to essentially use Unicorn as a free link body for the first go around and then bring it back with Birth. You can also, if you have a very specific hand, special summon like Unicorn, Birth, normal summon Fenrir, go Draco Sack, summon the tokens, use the tokens to make Cherubini, send away the Dormouse, and then link Draco Sack and the Cherubini to make the Haggard, banish Dormouse, come back, and then you can use Birth, bring back the Unicorn. That's like a lot of bodies at that point, so Nib is very much a possibility there, but it is in a weird way its own like one card combo essentially. I think in this version of the deck, Signet Mining has a lot more value because you are trying to find your Malice monsters, simply because the Kashtira package doesn't really get into them if you do not have a way to get both bodies on the board. You can also just go like Signet Mining, send Unicorn to add a Malice monster if you open Birth, which does happen sometimes. But overall, like, the cash build is very like straightforward. There's not a whole lot of major extension, especially if you get Nibiru, because Nibiru puts a token on your board, so you can't just summon out a Unicorn after that. However, Birth does allow you to have some sort of crackback if you do get nibbed, and then you go Birth, bring back the Unicorn, and then maybe you have a Bestial like banish a Malice monster. You have 3 bodies at that point. You can maybe do something with that. But overall, like, there's a reason this version of the deck has fallen off a little bit. And again, it's because it doesn't do anything major under Lancia. They go Lancia, you can't just go Unicorn in response because you cannot banish. So Lancia, again, doesn't like body this version deck. You can put up a more formidable end board because just passing on Unicorn, Birth, plus like maybe a Malice monster can be enough. But overall, like, there's a reason this version of the deck has fallen off. And it's mainly because the other 2 versions of the deck heavily have ways to play under Lancia, and that's kind of what's making these other engines perform better, and what people are looking for in another engine for Malice is, can it play under Lancia? All right, so the next version of the deck we're going to talk about is the Fiendsmith version of the deck, and which is probably my favorite version of the deck, just because I do like the Fiendsmith cards a lot. I think they are really cool and powerful, but overall it's very just simple. To give credit where credit is due, this is a topping list from Jared Mendel at the Rosemont Regional. Jared, if you're watching, congratulations. You're probably not watching, but regardless, congratulations. We are seeing the Molt Charming Fualos, which means we don't have to run nearly as much non-engine, simply because Fualos is going to threaten your opponent to keep playing, and I'm going to draw a lot of cards. Obviously, Ash and Imperm is like all you really need. Both those cards can stop Duo Drive from going off. 5 Bestials. I personally am not a fan of 3 Druisworm. 9 times I don't even like running 2 Druisworm because I always open both Druisworms. But Druisworm is obviously a threat of its own in this current format, especially if you just link it away like Malice will do. It's going to just kind of tell you no. Also, Druisworm sends, it does not destroy, which means the detonator cannot protect itself. The Fiendsmith package is pretty condensed, and I think a lot of it is just because they are running Fualos, so they are going to draw into it, and if they don't, you know, they'll find it some way or another. But 2 Engraver, 1 Lacrima, 2 Tract, and then 1 Paradise. We are seeing a big resurgence in Tract being played more than one of. I like that a lot, actually, personally. Obviously, the one of the Luri. And then for the extra deck for the Fiendsmith package, we're seeing 1 Dez, 1 Necroquip, 1 Chaos Angel, 1 Sequence, 1 Requiem, and then 1 of the Moon. So when I was testing with this deck, I actually did get Tunnel Vision. This is something I don't want you all to fall prey to. Just because you are running the Fiendsmith package does not mean you have to try and turbo out a Fiendsmith end board. You don't need to turbo out the Desiree. You don't need to turbo out the Caesar. If you can, more power to you, but do not get Tunnel Vision for it. Yes, the Malice monsters do conflict because they lock you into links, but what you can end up doing is using the Malice monsters to link into Closed Heaven, and then link into Requiem. Requiem send the Lacrima to the board, and then Lacrima send the Paradise to the graveyard, and then you just use the Lacrima to further use a body for your further plays. Then you have Paradise to send Desiree, and then you have full like Fiendsmith combo on your opponent's turn, so that way you can just, for the crackback, have the full Fiendsmith end board. Do not get Tunnel Vision on turn 1. The only other critique I have, and again, this comes down to personal preference, is the Chessie Cat. He's running 3. I see this card jump from 1 to 3 to 2 all the time. I personally only run the 1. I don't like this card being in my opening hand 9 times out of 10. But again, it is personal preference. Just overall, I like this build a lot. I think it's very clean. If you don't have Fool Loss and you don't want to run Fool Loss, then maybe play a little more non-engine like Ogre or even Droll and Lockbird, because both of those cards are very powerful in the current format, mainly against Ryzeal. One thing to note here though is this deck does very well under Lancia. The Fiendsmith cards do not do anything that interacts with what Lancia stops. They do not banish in any way, shape, or form. They put stuff back into the main deck. So if you do end up getting Lancia'd and you have a way to go Fiendsmith combo, you can still end on Desiree, which in of itself is a bit of a threat. Or further, on top of that, you can use the Fiendsmith cards to further extend, because since you can't banish, you need the bodies on the board, meaning you can use them to extend into Red Ransom or Binder, so then maybe you can still set up a respectable end board for Malice that can then play on your opponent's turn. And the last version of the deck that I want to talk about is the more popular version of Malice, and that is the Sky Striker build. The most recent topping I could find for this deck is from a gentleman named Jimmy at the Monta Bar Regional. I think I slaughtered that. But the deck is, as it says, it's a Sky Striker version of the deck. They are playing a small Sky Striker engine with 3 Engage, 1 Widow Anchor, and 1 Hornet Drones. Very similar to like the Orcust Sky Striker deck back from Toss format, where they are playing a bunch of draw spells to hopefully find the Sky Striker package. Obviously, you have Chessy Cat, which is going to draw you 2 cards. You have White Binder, it's going to draw you 1 card. You have Allure of Darkness to draw 2. But overall, like, the deck's going to try and find it. They're playing a heavy abundance of spells, so Engage can draw a card. Engage alone is like full Malice combo if you have Engage plus a name, because you go Engage, Hornet Drone, summon token, Link for Kagari, add back the Hornet Drone for another token, and then summon a Malice monster, and there you go. 3 bodies on board for essentially nothing, and you have the ability to make a Link 3. He is playing the 3 Bestial Brothers, 1 Jerusalem, 1 Baldrake, 1 Magnemite. We're still seeing the 1 Dotscaper. We are still seeing the 3 Chessy Cat, which again, I personally do not like, but if this is something you want to run, go for it. Another card I don't like is Book of Eclipse. I see the reasoning behind it. It can just end an entire Ryzeal end board. It can force interaction. If they have Ash Blossom, they can Ash this. It can force Desiree if they have it. If they're ending on like Caesar plus Detonator, this just says no. Obviously, the field spell Cross can't do anything if their monsters are face down. But overall, I just don't like this card personally, but I see the application. We are seeing 2 Talent, 2 Thrust. Thrust, if you're going second, just finds you Engage. Obviously, it can find you Talent, which again bodies a Ryzeal end board. We are seeing the pack bit in the extra deck here for the Terahertz. We are seeing Link Spider for like Nibiru, or you can just link away the Hornet Drone token to make Link Spider. And then of course we're seeing the Kagari. This is the only Sky Striker Link monster that's getting played in this version of the build. And the reason this version of the deck is the most favorable version is because of how well it plays under Lancia, but also it's going second potential. The cool thing about Book of Eclipse here is that it can kind of be an end board piece, but also used to break a board, essentially. You can just set Book of Eclipse on your turn going first, and because you're playing Link monsters, none of your monsters going face down. Going second, if you're going against Ryzeal, you just book that shit down, and if they don't have a way to Ash it, or if they don't have a way to stop it, they might just be losing right there. But also on top of that, Widow Anchor is a target negation. It can steal the monster, which is something a Ryzeal doesn't want. With Twins coming out in Supreme Darkness, I think Widow Anchor loses a little bit more of its value, and I think we might start seeing more of Shark Cannon going into the next format, but we'll just have to see. All right, so next is going to be the combos. First, I'm going to show you like the very like basic combos, but I want to show you the difference between if you open Dormouse, if you open Cat, if you open Sark, and if you open Field Spell, because they're very different scenarios. So to start, we are going to normal summon the Dormouse. Dormouse effect, banish the Rabbit for cost. Rabbit effect, pay 3 for cost to summon back. We will then use the Rabbit effect to set from the deck. The TB11 is what we are going to set. We will then link them away for the Haggard Lizardos. We will use Lizard, banish the Mouse for cost. Then we'll use the Mouse effect, pay the 300 for cost to revive back. After that, we will link away the Haggard and the Mouse for the Red Ransom. Ransom effect, add the field spell to our hand. We will then activate the TB11, banish the Ransom for cost, special summon the Cat from the deck. Ransom effect, 900 for the cost, and then we will summon her, banish the Dotscaper from the deck. We will then go Dotscaper effect to revive back. Now, I mentioned this a little bit ago. This is usually where you would want to use Nibiru, because from here, it's pretty much an open game state. The only effect that can come back if it's banished is Cat, and that is heavily reliant on what's left in their hand. Obviously, they have Malice and Underground in their hand because they haven't used it at this point, meaning they might have further extension. So you got to be very careful about Nibiruing here, but this is probably one of the more ideal spots. From here, we'll link away the Dotscaper and the cat, summon out the Splash Mage. We will then go Splash Mage, revive the cat, link them both away for the White Binder. On summon, we'll go White Binder effect, banish away the Cheshire Cat and the TB11. We will then go Cat effect, pay 300 for cost, special summon her back from the banish pile. From here, we will link away the Cheshire Cat for the Link Decoder. We will then link the Decoder and the White Binder for the Firewall Dragon. Go Link Decoder effect in the graveyard, special summon it back from the graveyard. We will then activate Malice and Underground, banishing the White Binder, and then we'll go White Binder effect, pay 900 for cost to special summon her back. I misclicked on the Red Ransom. We will then draw the card off of Binder's effect. Could have been anything, but in this example, it was Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Keep in mind, we have 4 unknown cards in our hand at this point. We will then use Firewall Dragon, put the Cheshire Cat back in our hand, and the White Rabbit back in our hand. We'll then go White Binder effect to set from the deck or the graveyard. We'll set the GWC so we have the ability to play on our opponent's turn. We will then link away the Binder, the Ransom, and the Decoder, banish it because it left the field, to special summon the Heart's Cryptor. We'll go Firewall, special summon the Cat, Cat effect, banish the White Rabbit, draw 2 cards. Again, could have been anything, but it was Birth and Snow Rabbit again. We will then link away the Firewall, the Cryptor, and the Cat for the Terahertz. We'll go Terahertz effect, send away the Deceive Worm or your Code of Soul, really just up to you, or, you know, your Meow Mine if you have further extension. But overall, this is like the end board, and I actually heavily encourage you guys not to go for this because this is kind of nothing. A lot of Malice players have discovered that this, for the most part, isn't a whole lot. Like, Ultimate Slayer kind of kills this end board because it just kills Terahertz, which means Deceive Worm is offline. You have GWC, but that's not going to get you very far. You may have hand traps depending on what the other 4 cards plus your 3 draws were. But overall, like, this isn't a whole lot, and because we normal summoned the Dormouse without setting a card, if we got Imperned, we probably wouldn't have gotten this far. All right, so like I said, opening Dormouse versus Rabbit are 2 very different scenarios, and Rabbit is a lot more dependent on if you open other extension in your opening hand. But let's, of course, just see how far a Rabbit can get us. The end board is, like, respectable, but it's very, like, contextual on if your opponent has interaction, if your opponent has Nibiru specifically, but also, again, if you have further extension in your opening hand, because Rabbit alone cannot get you there. But normal summon Rabbit, Rabbit effect, set the TB11. We then just immediately shotgun the TB11, which is the part that hurts us because we tend to use that to play around Nibiru, but also to further extend later. Banish the Rabbit for cost, special summon Dormouse. Rabbit effect to special summon back with 300 for cost. Link them both away immediately into the Haggard. We then go Haggard effect, banish the Dormouse for cost. Dormouse effect, pay 3 for cost to revive it back. And then we activate Dormouse. The reason we're doing this here is because we don't have TB11 anymore. I mean, we cannot banish the Ransom. It's going to be our only body. It's going to be hard to get it off the board unless we have further extension. We need another body. We go banish the Cat, Cat effect, pay 300 for cost to revive her back. We will then just link her and the Haggard away for the Red Ransom. Ransom, add the field spell back to our hand. This field spell is very important because it's going to help us banish one of the links out of the graveyard, but we don't want to use it like right away. So what we're going to actually end up doing is we are going to end up linking away the Dormouse and the Ransom for SP Little Knight. And because we used a link monster, Little Knight will banish a card from the graveyard, aka Red Ransom. Ransom effect, pay 900 for cost, summon her back, and banish the Dotscaper from our deck. We'll then go Dotscaper to revive it back to the field, and then, again, we're in a bit of a bad situation here. So we, again, this is why it heavily depends what the other 4 cards in our hand are. So we are going to link away the Dotscaper and the SP Little Knight for a Splash Mage. We cannot just go into a Malice Link monster because we don't have a Malice monster on board. So we're going to have to go Splash Mage, bit of a detour here. Special summon a Dormouse, it doesn't really matter. Link them away for the White Binder. We'll go White Binder effect, banish the TB11 here. And then we are going to actually link away the Binder and the Ransom for Firewall Dragon. Again, this is why it's very dependent what other cards in your hand when you open Rabbit, because it heavily changes what the game state's going to look like. So take this with a grain of salt. We're just looking at what Rabbit alone can get you, which again is mildly respectable. We will then activate the field spell, banish the White Binder. Binder effect, pay 9 for cost, bring her back underneath the Firewall Dragon, so at least it's co-linked. draw one card. Talents, oh boy. Binder effect, set the GWC from the deck, and that's all she wrote. So what are we looking at here? We have a Firewall Dragon that's not expended. It is a once per face up, which means we do get the one bounce since he's co-linked, which can come up. We have the GWC, which can revive White Rabbit, and then Rabbit set the MTP, which can then banish the Binder, draw a card, Binder come back, banish other cards. And then MTP, of course, gains follow-up. So there's interaction, but it's iffy this time around. Like I said, this end board is mildly respectable. It can do stuff, but we have to remember we have 4 other cards in our hand that are unknown in this example. We don't know what they are. They could be more extension, because if we had a Bestial in hand, we could have then linked away the Rabbit, summon the Bestial, banish the Rabbit, and then we still have full combo from there. So it's very dependent. The last mainline combo I want to talk about is if you open Malice and Underground and Gold Sark. It's minutely different, but not different enough to like distinguish the two. And I'll talk about where things would actually differentiate if we opened Sark rather than Underground, but we're going to, for this example, just go for Underground. Like I said, it is somewhat different based on which one you open and if you're even running Gold Sark, but we're gonna just lead with Underground. So we're going to activate Underground, use its effect, banish the Dormouse. Dormouse effect, pay 300 for cost, special summon her back to the field. Dormouse effect, banish the Rabbit from the deck. Rabbit effect, pay 300 to revive herself, and then special summon her, and then activate her effect to set the TB11. So we can't use Haggard here simply because Haggard will not extend. Both of them have already expended their banish effects, so we are going to have to link them away and early lock ourselves into Splash Mage. Not only does this hurt because of side engine stuff, but it's going to hurt because Splash Mage actually helps later in the combo if necessary. So we're going to go Splash Mage, revive one of the two, it does not matter, link them away for the Red Ransom. Red Ransom effect, add the second field spell to our hand, and then we'll go TB11, banish the Ransom for cost, special summon a cat, Ransom effect from the banish pile, pay the 900 for cost, special summon her back, and banish the Dotscaper from the deck. We will then go Dotscaper effect to revive back. And again, this is where things get a little weird, because normally we would have to make Splash Mage here to extend further. Can't do that. We don't have Splash Mage at our disposal anymore. So we're going to link all 3 of them away to make the White Binder. Binder effect, banish the cat and the TB11. And then we'll go Cat effect, pay 300 for cost to revive herself. Now we're just going to go Cat, banish the second field spell, draw 2 cards. Could be anything. Could be extenders somehow. For this example, we have more hand traps, which is fine. And then we're going to go White Binder, set the GWC. And because we want this White Binder in the graveyard, we are going to actually end up linking her and the cat away to summon out Firewall Dragon. So what the goal here is this is where we're ending, is Firewall Dragon, GWC, and then possibly hand traps. We use the GWC, revive the White Binder from the graveyard in the spot where Firewall Dragon will be co-linked, so we have an interaction with Firewall, but then White Binder will be able to banish stuff from our graveyard to be able to further recur resources. Again, it's not a lot, but where things would differentiate here is if we opened Gold Sark rather than Field Spell, we would not use Cat to banish the Field Spell. Instead, we would actually link away Cat and White Binder to summon out probably Firewall Dragon still, and we would then use the Field Spell Banish Binder so we get another draw. Then we're just ending on Firewall plus White Binder, essentially. It's pretty much the same thing, but we do get an extra draw out of it. There are also scenarios where maybe you just don't use the Malice and Underground to banish White Binder, instead you banish something else. But more rather than not, this is where you're pretty much ending, maybe some minute differences. But overall, like Gold Sark and Malice and Underground aren't like a huge difference. They do the same thing, except Malice and Underground can banish from grave. But overall, like, it's pretty much the same end board. So it's not like notable to talk about 2 different combos. All right, so to end off this video real quick, I do want to talk about some quick interactions that the deck has. To start, and do not lose to this, call a judge if someone's telling you this is not how it works, because this is how it works. If you get hit with Imperm or Skill Drain or something on Heart's Cryptor's Banish effect, it still resolves. The reason being is that the parentheses say if this card points at a monster, this cannot be negated. That is not an effect. That is just a continuous lingering application of the field or the game state. Where Heart's Cryptor effect to banish a card on the field cannot be negated. So you can actually use Heart's Cryptor to out skill drain or just some other nuisance card, even if its effects are being negated, because its effects cannot be negated when it's pointing at a monster. So keep that in mind. That's a huge interaction. Another cool thing here is access code. Access code, its ruling is that when it banishes a link monster, it cannot banish a monster of the same attribute. However, if it's hit with something like skill drain or imperm, that checks on resolution, which means access code isn't resolving, it's negated. So you can actually keep banishing darks. One thing to note here is this ruling is heavily dependent on your head judge, so make sure you ask your head judge before going into an event, because it's been ruled both two different ways. And another thing that I talked about earlier in the video, if you are playing Malice, don't be afraid to set some bluffs. If you do not open a trap and you want to threaten your opponent's imperm, just set like a Signet Mining and then normal summon Dormouse. Now, it's kind of 50-50 if they take the bait or not, because sometimes they won't, and then you're full combo. But on a technical play level, this is always the correct play, because you are playing mind games with your opponent. You are trying to threaten that, hey, if you imperm me, it might not play out, and I'm still going to pop off. So just keep that in mind, but always just set some bluffs. As for playing around Nibiru, my best recommendation is always try to keep one of your Malice monsters' banish effects available in rotation, even if you get late into the combo, because if they hit you with Nibiru, it could hurt if you don't have further extension. But on top of that, always keep an extension available, even if you have a Bestial, because you never know when you're going to hit with Nibiru, because unless you have Caesar from the Fiendsmith package, you're always kind of in threat of Nibiru. You have no way to stop it. Your opponent could just hold it till the end of the turn and then just hit you with it. My only issue there is that if they hold it that long and you have GWC set in the back row, it's pretty much all for nothing for them. You still get your whole end board back on the next turn. So it's really just dependent on what you're playing. As for Lancia, my best recommendation against playing against Lancia is play a subsidiary engine that's going to allow you to play under Lancia, or play Crossout. All I can really say is if you're not playing an engine that's going to let you play through it, then play at your own risk. Know what you're getting yourself into. But that is all I really have for you guys today. Let me know in the comments below if this was a way better in-depth guide than the last one, but also if you want to see the in-depth guides do a little bit more of what I did this time around. Also, if you're not already and you like Malice related content, but also competitive based content, consider subscribing to the channel, supporting the channel, so I can continue to make videos like this one, but also leave a like on this video. I also stream randomly on twitch.tv/cultofotaku, and I have a community Discord. Both links will be in the description below. But with that, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya.